Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into a truly fascinating medical mystery. I'm talking about a condition that can look and feel like a panic attack, a heart attack, and a massive blood pressure crisis, all rolled into one. So let's start by playing detective and looking at the clues. Okay, just imagine this for a second. Completely out of the blue, your head starts pounding with a pain unlike anything you've ever felt. At the same time, your heart is beating so hard it feels like it's trying to escape your chest, and you're suddenly completely drenched in sweat. What on earth could be going on? Well, that's the central question we're tackling today. So, to get to the bottom of this mystery, first, we've got to look at the evidence. And that evidence comes in the form of these baffling, sudden, and, let's be honest, totally terrifying attacks. Now, when doctors are faced with a case like this, they're on the lookout for a very specific pattern of clues. It's a set of 3 symptoms that, when they show up together, act like a huge, flashing neon sign, pointing them in a very particular direction. This is known as the classic triad.
First up, the headache. And listen, we're not talking about your average, everyday tension headache here. This is a severe, throbbing, almost explosive pain that hits you like a freight train, and it's often triggered by a sudden, massive spike in blood pressure.
The second clue, profuse sweating. The medical term is diaphoresis, but that doesn't really do it justice. We're talking about being soaked to the skin as if someone just threw a bucket of water on you, even if you're just sitting perfectly still. It's your body's alarm system just going haywire.
And the third piece of the triad, a racing, pounding heart. This feeling of your heart just hammering against your ribs, totally out of control, is called tachycardia. And as you can imagine, it just adds a massive wave of panic to what is already an incredibly scary experience.
But here's where it gets tricky. The culprit doesn't always leave the same neat set of clues. Beyond that classic triad, you can get all sorts of other signs. Those crazy blood pressure spikes, tremors, nausea, and even this really strange, profound feeling, a sense of impending doom. This variability makes it a real chameleon, which is why it can be so tough to pin down.
So, what is the culprit? I mean, what could possibly unleash this kind of chaos inside the body? Well, the best way to think about it is like a tiny rogue factory that's gone completely off the rails.
The villain of our story is called a Phaeochromocytoma. Yeah, it's a mouthful. But put simply, it's a rare tumor usually found in the adrenal glands, which are these little glands that sit right on top of your kidneys. This tumor acts like a rogue factory, just pumping out colossal, uncontrolled floods of stress hormones, specifically catecholamines. It's that hormone flood that's causing every single one of those dramatic symptoms.
Okay, so we have our prime suspect. Now, how do our medical detectives actually prove it's guilty? Well, cracking this case takes a really specific and careful investigation. The investigation follows a very clear 2-step process. Think of it this way. Step 1 is to prove the crime was committed by finding the evidence in the system. Step 2 is to find the bad guy's hideout.
So step 1 is all about finding the hormonal fingerprints. The absolute best way to do this is to test for something called metanephrines, which are basically the breakdown products of those stress hormones, in a 24-hour urine sample. With a 97% sensitivity, this test is incredibly good at sniffing out the evidence, way better than older tests, making it the undisputed gold standard.
Once the lab tests come back positive, it's time to bring in the high-tech surveillance, CT or MRI scans. These incredible imaging tools create a super detailed map of your insides, allowing doctors to get a precise GPS location of the tumor, whether it's in the adrenal glands or hiding out somewhere else.
So, the case is cracked, the culprit has been located. Now the final, critical phase begins, planning the mission to go in and safely neutralize the threat.
And you absolutely cannot rush this part. The stakes are unbelievably high. Why? Because the tumor itself is like a booby trap. If you just go in and try to remove it, it can release one last massive and potentially fatal surge of hormones. That's why careful preparation is, as it says here, essential to mitigate perioperative hypertensive crises, or, in plain English, to prevent a catastrophic blood pressure spike during surgery.
The strategy is basically a 2-part special ops mission. For part 1, the patient gets medications called alpha blockers for a couple of weeks before the operation. This is like putting up a protective shield around the body, blocking the effects of any hormone surges and getting that wild blood pressure under control. Then, and only then, once everything is stable, can the team move on to part 2, the careful, meticulous surgical removal of the tumor itself.
Now that we've covered the what and the how, let's zoom out. Let's talk about the who and the when. I mean, how common is this thing really? And what are its usual calling cards? First off, who gets this? Well, the peak time for diagnosis, the sweet spot if you can call it that, is right in the middle of life, typically between the ages of 40 and 50. And how rare is it? Oh, it's extremely rare. Just look at this chart to get some perspective. For every 10 cases of another pretty uncommon condition called fibromuscular dysplasia, you get only 1 case of Phaeochromocytoma. So yeah, we're talking about a true medical zebra. And because it's so rare, doctors actually have a handy little memory aid they've used for years to remember its key characteristics. It's a classic mnemonic known simply as the rule of tens.
The first 10 is actually some good news. While any tumor is a serious thing, only about 10% of these are malignant or cancerous. That means the vast majority, a full 90%, are benign, so they won't spread to other parts of the body.
Next up in the rule is location. About 10% of the time these tumors are bilateral, which means you find them in both adrenal glands. But again, flip that around and it means in 90% of cases, it's just in a single gland. And finally, the rule also tells us where to look. The usual hideout is the adrenal gland, right? Well, in about 10% of cases, the tumor is extra-adrenal. That means the rogue factory has set up shop somewhere else entirely, in the abdomen, the chest, you name it. It's a useful rule of thumb, but it really drives home why that detailed imaging is so incredibly important. And that all brings us to a final thought. Phaeochromocytoma is a perfect example of what doctors call a great mimic. It's a master of disguise, a rare condition whose symptoms can look like a dozen more common things. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the biggest medical mysteries aren't solved in a single flash of genius, but by patiently, carefully piecing together the right clues. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it? What else is out there, hiding in plain sight, just waiting to be discovered?